it's a brave new world and things are changing fast. And there's like, you're either riding the wave or you like pretend like the wave isn't there. And tying back to your post, Mark, from like a month ago, the people that are like naysayers about this whole thing, they just don't know. If you're listening and you're a naysayer, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Like you're wrong. You're about to get smacked by the wave. And it's not, you don't want to be smacked by the wave. You got to ride the wave. So people who are skeptical, people who are curious, just spend time using the tools and try it yourself. And yeah, there's stuff that doesn't work and it's good. Don't use it for that. Right. It's like you go, silly comparable example is you go to the doctor. It's like, it hurts when I do this. It's like, well, don't do that. Like like there's just, it's evolving so fast that the only way to stay on top of it is to actively use it, figure out what it's good for, and then use it for yourself. And then you'll learn.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Supra Insider. This time we sat down with a repeat guest, Will Newton, who's a principal product architect, I believe, at Amplitude. Will was on one of our most popular episodes ever just recently, and we wanted to bring him back on the podcast to talk about the very fast evolving world of how AI prototyping tools are impacting design workflows and PM workflows. So in this conversation, we talked about some of the major organizational developments that have happened at Amplitude in just like the last month since we recorded. We talked about what their current happy path is for doing product explorations and prototyping and what's expected of PMs and designers at Amplitude, and what the latest like state of tech is when it comes to what you can expect a tool like Bolt to do very well and what maybe it's not ready to do yet. And we finished with I thought a really fun and interesting discussion of what quality and taste is going to mean in a world where there's just a tremendous amount of leverage that people can get from AI prototyping tools like Bolt. Yeah, I hope you enjoy it. My brain is still juiced up. We just wrapped up the conversation. I hope you enjoy it. And thanks for listening. If you enjoy this conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcasting app. Follow us on Substack. Give us a rating. It'll help us a ton and help future people discover us while also making sure you never miss an episode. Thank you. We're back for part 2. Welcome back, Will.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for the invite.
Great to have you back, man.
We had such a good time with you last time, and that episode ended up being, I think it's still our top performing episode so far. It lit a fire on the LinkedIn sphere. Mark had, I think, his top performing post ever, writing about one of the questions that came out of our last conversation, which is like, is Figma about to lose its position in the market? Not saying, Will, that you said that, but that was a question that we were thinking about after that conversation. And a lot of the people in that thread were like, yes, like they need to do something or else something bad will happen. Gokul had a post about this too that went pretty viral. And then 20% of the people or so, maybe in that post comments, are saying, nah, I don't think this is going to happen. Like they're like skeptical. And so maybe one good place to kick off our conversation today is let's just put some more wood behind the arrow, perhaps, and hear some, like, what have you guys been doing since the last time? Because I think there's been some evolutions in the way that you all have been using these tools. And yeah, maybe we can just start there.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack. I think there's on the is Figma about to lose its market dominance question. It's like that's a hot take, right? I hope not. Figma has done a huge amount for the design community, and Figma has done a huge amount for my career personally as an early adopter of Figma. It changed the way that design happens. I think what's interesting though is like there was definitely it's like being first doesn't always matter, right? And so it was like we talked a little bit last time about how there was a window of opportunity where Figma tried to put out some AI stuff, didn't really go over super well. And then all of this code generation, iteratively describe your design and get beautiful, correct functional code just came out of nowhere. And like, where's the dot connect with Figma? I don't know. There's definitely a Figma. It feels like you cannot beat the precision of this is exactly what I'm trying to do, precisely what I'm trying to do. but there's something kind of insanely next level about the vibe coding aspect of I can turn a napkin sketch into the thing that I'm talking about faster than it takes me to draw it in Figma. From like a enterprise software production standpoint, that doesn't matter, right? What we're talking about there is, hey, let's make quick prototypes that we can easily test or validate. You make something just to explain the idea. It's not going into production. It's just like, this is what I mean, right? More easily advance the conversation. But when you're using it like that, that's like what people used Figma to do in the past. So there's like a use case replacement. So I reach for Bolt and or V0. We can get into the differences between them before Figma for a napkin sketch use case consistently. Now, I reach for Figma when I'm trying to do things like more concretely, like this is exactly what it's going to be. Like specs you want to be doing in Figma. It's like, because it's a drawing, it's a blueprint. The idea of the Figma prototype being the artifact, though, that's the thing that I feel like is most at risk. So Figma won because they had the trifecta of you can make the thing, you can fake the thing, and you can collaborate in the thing. And that blew everything else out of the water. But now the fake the thing part of that equation is probably more easily done by these other things that are evolving very rapidly, right? And so it's like one of the main pillars that made it successful is like no longer monopolized. So that would be like my more measured take on this.
But what's interesting too is that kind of fake it step is often the first step too, which kind of gives you like a huge advantage, right? If then you're already in that tool and then you can continue the process in that same tool, then you might have an advantage. So I think that's where it's kind of like, it's an interesting window opportunity if they can figure out like how to do that.
Well, it kind of feels like, just to build on that for a sec, Mark, it feels like in Will's framework of the build the thing, fake the thing, and was it ship the thing, the last one, or collaborate on the thing?
There's things, it's not sequential though. It happens like all at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. It's different dimensions of how to make
it's
something.
Almost like a loop, basically, right?
Yeah,
in a way.
Sure.
And then you have like a design system too.
But I think a lot of the traditional way of thinking about building software and designing software has a little bit more of a linear like structure to it, which is like we'll have an idea and then we'll do like lo-fi and we'll do hi-fi and then we'll prototype in hi-fi and then we'll implement whatever the hi-fi prototype implies, something like that, and collaborate along the way. And they've built obviously like FigJam to do like the lo-fi brainstorming phase of that as well. So Figma had something good for every phase of that linear kind of like progression that everyone just like used, right? And what I kind of see as the disruptive element to the workflow is that the faking and it's almost like the prototyping part of that got pulled out, and then like the brainstorming and the lo-fi, hi-fi, fuck around and find out part got pulled out, and you could now both of those got almost like front loaded in the process into like a tool like Bolt. So it's like you're doing all of like that rapid messing around in Bolt, and then it sounds like you're coming to Figma to put a final bow on everything so that engineering is clear on the specs. Is that basically what I'm...
Yeah, it's hard to say because the reality is it depends. And so I can give you an example where it's yes, and I can give you an example where it's no. So let me just color in a little bit of what has changed at Amplitude since the last time we talked. We dove straight into it today. For people who haven't heard the last episode, I'm a product designer at Amplitude. Amplitude does product analytics. It's a platform. We also do things like session replay, guides and surveys, experimentation, all sorts of things related to analytics. And so it helps you build better products. And we have this obsession with shipping fast, iterating and learning, right, with customers. Very important to do that. And so how can we ship faster is by going directly to making something that feels real with code and bypassing the let's build this prototype phase. You can learn incredibly fast. And so one of the things that we've been doing is, so basically the entire design team now, we have actual Bolt license. So everyone's using Bolt now. And are we using it all the time for everything? No.
To set some context, like when we talked last time, I believe it was like maybe you and another designer were playing with these tools.
Yeah.
But maybe it was like 5% of the org. It's like you were like the early adopters and you both knew that you had a superpower that no one else did. And it sounds like now, like fast forward like a month, you're saying like every designer basically has a license now.
Yes. And it's not like everyone's using it all the time. It's like we're trying to go that way though. And it's definitely going that way, it feels. And we're still trying to figure out exactly like when and why should you use the different things. But it's very much like a figure it out as you go approach. So let me give you one example. We're building out a bunch of new things for AI and Amplitude. So at Amplitude, something that happened to me was in the past week, we're working on this brand new 0 to 1 feature. And obviously, we're focused on what's the critical path, what's like the core functionality, just make sure that it actually is the minimum viable thing. And as a designer who uses all of these tools, these consumer grade tools, there's all these interaction details that just make using AI feel good, like showing your work and iterative loading states and like tool call streaming. Like I'm thinking, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I can expand it to see what it means. Like all of these details help you learn to trust the system. And this is the kind of thing where historically engineering and PM, no offense, you guys, they'd be like, no, that's for the GA. Like we're just doing alpha right now. Like don't worry about any of that. So what happened was I made those details myself. I made those components myself and I sent them to my engineer and he copied and pasted them in. And so like in our first version, we have these really great details for the loading states and the transitions and all this stuff. And it's just because I did it and because I wanted to. And it's like, that's the unlock where it's like, if you have a vision and if you have the understanding of like the quality bar and like the taste of what good is, you can just do things yourself rather than persuading engineering to prioritize or like persuading other people to put the work to do the thing. Is you can just do the thing, right? And it's like that's it's addicting, it's empowering, it's just a completely different ball game than the before world where like you tinker with your prototype, your Figma prototype, you got these amazing Figma prototypes and stuff just doesn't get built that way. And there's this disconnect. Is like the future is like get your hands in the materials. And we talked a lot before about, yeah, it's really great for prototyping ideas to validate. That's true. It's also great for like improving the quality bar on the core product. And so very soon, what I don't know if this is a prediction or if it's just like you see it coming, everyone's going to be using the raw materials and it's not going to be like you said before, Ben, like why is low fidelity a thing? What does low fidelity do?
It used to be a thing because it was cheaper than high fidelity or cheaper than building.
Right. And I would say on the user experience side, the purpose of low fidelity is to figure out the information architecture without the distraction of what it looks like or whatever. And but if it's easier to do that in code because you can generate code, it's faster than drawing boxes and you can have 3 different versions that feel real where you're simulating the end. It's just the entire thing blows up. So yeah.
Go ahead, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's fascinating. I hadn't thought about that part of you're almost becoming like a UI engineer and you're almost kind of like all those things that before were like nice to haves now don't have to be nice to haves because someone can just go in and basically what you're saying is that you share the prototype or you share like your bold team. Like I actually don't know how bold teams works, but they can just take that like basically like front end code and they can just paste it into whatever component and it just works. That's basically like what the engineer is doing.
Close. Kind of. Yeah. I think there's not really any better way. I feel like I should just show you.
Is there anything confidential that you can't show?
We can always. I would say let's on the side of showing it. Let's cut it if for some reason you're like, oh, actually, highly confidential, and I might get in trouble.
It's not confidential because it's a loading state. So let me just show you. Let me see if I can pull up this window.
Demo time. Ring.
Demo time. All right. So this is something that I made. What's today? Friday? 2 days ago. Right. This is what I'm talking about. Tool call streaming loading states. So this is a thing. It's like when if an agent is doing 5 steps for you, this is what you should see rather than one loading state. And so for the listeners, people who are not looking at this, how do I turn this off? There we go. For the listeners, we've got, there's a loading animation. It says analyzing your website. There's a spinner. And then when it's done doing that, it turns green and you get a check mark. And then another loading indicator comes in below. It says analyzing this specific page, turns green, check mark. New loading indicator comes in from below, says synthesizing the learnings. And then the AI would then summarize what it found, right? And so you get these indicators of these are the steps that the AI is taking. It's animated, it looks nice, it's shimmering, and it makes the experience of waiting suck less. And this is something that would never be in a version 1, right? And it's now in our version 1 because I took 15 minutes to write it. And it's basically able to be dropped in.
And
because I made it in
There's a really interesting point here. So like the reason that these kinds of things used to not make the cut for the version 1 is what? That the engineering scope required for figuring it out was too
impact
high.
Over effort and prioritization. It's not that it's like figuring out it's just not critical path. And it's like different people have different opinions on what like is critical path. And so what I would say is consumerization of enterprise UX software is right. Like enterprise software used to get away with being crappy because the buyer's not the user and the promise is made, the license is bought, the end users have to use it no matter what because it's their job, like whatever. And so they get to people get to get away with bad UX. So then like Slack comes along, fastest growing company at the time ever. And it's why? Because their user experience was awesome. It grew virally. People were demanding it. Or like anecdote from my boss, Kim, VP of design, she said when she was at LinkedIn, there were like all these different teams were all using Slack independently. And then the head of IT is like, all right, everyone stop, shut it down. We're buying this, stop doing this, one project, everyone come together. That's how Figma grew, is the design teams started using it on their own. And then it's like, okay, like we need this to be legit and efficient.
And that just happened with Bolt.
I'm using it on the side. Different people have we run out of tokens. We all start paying. We're expensing our personal licenses. And then it's like, okay, we want to take this more seriously. We want to have privacy controls, all this stuff. And so then we bought a real license, right? And so what does that mean? When these companies are growing like exponential, I was just listening to a podcast, the Dive Club Designer podcast. They had the designer from Lovable on, and he was going off about how it's a brave new world and things are changing fast. And there's like, you're either riding the wave or you like pretend like the wave isn't there. And tying back to your post, Mark, from like a month ago, the people that are like naysayers about this whole thing, they just don't know. If you're listening and you're a naysayer, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Like you're wrong. You're about to get smacked by the wave. And you don't want to be smacked by the wave. You got to ride the wave. So people who are skeptical, people who are curious, just spend time using the tools and try it yourself. And yeah, there's stuff that doesn't work. And it's good. Don't use it for that, right? It's like you go, silly comparable example is you go to the doctor. It's like, it hurts when I do this. It's like, well, don't do that. Like there's just, it's evolving so fast that the only way to stay on top of it is to actively use it, figure out what it's good for, and then use it for yourself. And then you'll learn. So I personally turned a skeptic into a believer last week. So I was speaking with someone. She was saying, how does AI fundamentally change the design process? I'm like, well, it doesn't. But what it does do is it changes the pace and the order and the way that like how fast you're able to physically do the thing in a really meaningful way, in such a way actually that you might change the order in which you do stuff entirely because the rules that made the order in the first place no longer exist. And so then I think the aha moment from her was when I showed her Gamma. So Gamma creates slideshows, right? It creates presentations. Gamma AI. And there was an open question about like, we were asked to do this presentation on quality, and I was sitting next to her and I used ChatGPT to create a summary of the usability heuristics, the like Nielsen usability heuristics, which is like very well-known, well-studied, like laws of truth about user expectation in interaction design. So if the system is off, it should show that it's off. If you make an error, you should be able to undo, like just basic stuff that all software should abide by. And I took those notes and I put it into Gamma, and it made a slide deck of like explaining each of these things with sources and examples. And she was like, "Oh my God, like this is great. I hate formatting presentations. I also hate formatting presentations." So imagine if you've got the juice in your head, you have all the context and the answers in your head, and you can use these tools to accelerate the loop of what you're doing and get rid of the busy work and the crap work and focus on the important work. The trap, and when I hear the naysayers talk about naysaying stuff, the doomers, whatever, it's because what they're afraid of is if you don't understand what good looks like, and if you don't understand the problem you're solving, and if you don't like actually know what you're doing, and you use these things, you go straight into bullshit territory. And it's like, yeah, like that's a serious risk, right? It's like if you use these tools enough, you know when someone used ChatGPT to write something. It's like they sound like an NPC, kind of, right? It's like, what is this? NPC, non-player characters, video game reference for people, but it's like this is like not a. It's like agree. First sentence agrees with what you're saying. So like second sentence, like hints at the conclusion, then breakdown of a thing, and then like conclusion reiterates the whole thing. It's like ChatGPT wrote this. Like it's written.
Yeah, there's like some beef on X that forgot that someone like someone like famous in that sphere called the other person like like that term, and it was like the biggest insult, and that's how I figured out about that term. I forgot who it was. I'll try to find it and add it in the show notes, but it was pretty funny. Yeah, I think the other reason why like the naysayers are naysayers is I think they're like a little bit self-conscious about like the value that they add, right? And like they feel like the value that they're adding is getting replaced by that tool, and maybe they don't really understand where the true value that they could add should be added, basically. And I think what it could be really helpful, I think there's two potential paths that I'm excited to go into. One is I think going deep into how the product process has changed, and I would love to maybe even like involve PMs too. And then the other one that I think I'd love to cover too is like kind of the evolution that Amplitude has gone through of like maybe having two people that were early adopters to now like having everyone use it. I think that's also because we have a lot of product leaders in the audience that I think are asking the same question. Like, how do we get everyone kind of, really using these tools and 5xing or 10xing their productivity? So yeah, maybe why don't we start with like the full product process, or Ben, what do you have? Do you want to go the other direction?
And I like both of those. Something tells me we could probably touch on them together because I think they're both organizationally about kind of like how Amplitude's approaching this transition. And I think this conversation, based on what we talked about before hitting record, I think generally makes Amplitude look really forward thinking and make Amplitude look really good. So I think I 100%. Gain a lot of respect for the company based on what I heard before we hit record. And then as part of this, Will, you also said something that I would love to get on air and give it a little bit more space, which is around what the Bolt and Figma integration thing actually is, because I think that's super interesting the way you were breaking that down. Because I just, as a side note, Supra had kind of like small hackathon here in New York a couple weeks ago that I went to, and we're just like messing around with a bunch of AI stuff. And I demoed for the group that was there how the Figma Bolt, what I call, in my mind, it was a Figma Bolt integration. And I think you're saying that's not exactly what it is, but how that integration works, where you just copy a URL of a Figma artboard that ideally has some UI elements on it that you want to rebuild in Bolt. You drop that into a new browser tab. You append bolt.new before the Figma in the URL, and then you hit enter, and then it just starts literally building an app of that artboard based on the Figma in Bolt with components and code that you can start playing around with. And the general reaction from the group was like, holy shit, like, how long has this been out? And I'm like, I don't know, like 2 days. Like,
yeah, like, whoa.
So, yeah. So I just love to get your take on what that is, because I have a feeling you've been playing with that.
Totally. So to start, what I would say is let's use it real fast.
Yes.
So like, let's just
demo
do that.
Time. Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah. So let me see if I can find something that I feel like would work. I've got Figma open over here.
We should get hats that say we're here to watch Will cook.
Yeah. Also, Will, this is a good time. Can you dip your head down a little so the group can see your hat? For those listening, it says 50% data, 50% vibes.
It's a very important mantra. This is design team swag that we created. It's become very quickly a hot commodity inside of Amplitude. People are like, where can I get those hats? You can't. Sorry, there's no way.
It just makes me want it more.
I know. Yeah, scarcity. Let's try this really quick. All right. So
Okay.
this is Bolt.new. If you haven't tried it, go try it now. There's this button that says import from Figma. Click this button. I've already made the connection, so you have to authenticate your account. You paste your frame. But you right click your frame in Figma, copy frame as, whatever. And then it will do some things. And I asked it to recreate the interface for Ask Amplitude. We're going to see if this works. It might work. It might not work. If it doesn't work, this is a self-own, because the reason why it probably won't work is because my file is messy. So you want to do, this is getting into designer nerd out territory, but you need to be using auto layout. You need to be using like all the modern features of Figma. You can't be like slapping screenshots together. That's not going to work. So this is how it works under the hood. You see here, powered by Anima at the bottom. What's Anima? So Anima is the most popular or like most widely famous Figma to HTML tool. And so what Bolt did in their genius, the folks at StackBlitz, was they actually just put a wrapper around Anima. So
what did people use Anima for, like in the past?
For
like,
building
what was
static websites, like static marketing pages and stuff like that. But what this does is the Anima plugin reads the layers and the variables and the tokens and all the things in your file and translates that into HTML and CSS.
Genius.
Bolt lets that happen and then translates that into TypeScript, React, whatever. And so there's like a 1-2 punch. Let's see. This is pretty fucking solid, excuse my French, with a few exceptions. Yeah, this is pretty wild. So for reference, like the Figma file that I gave it was very close to this. There's a few details missing, like this whole thing should be white. The gray box should just be like around this stuff. But you've got the text, it's floating. The reroll is like weirdly positioned, but it's because the reroll was like floating on the canvas anyway. This is not a clean, I'm not a good example for having clean Figma files, but like this is a one shot. Like this is wild. And then I do a little bit of iteration, to fix some details. And then this is like ready to show and get feedback on. Theoretically, you could just show the Figma, like it's an input of a Figma anyway.
Yeah, but to our last conversation, so if we just hang out on this for a sec, Will, if you leave it up. So Our last conversation, we talked about how using these tools to increase iteration speed and get more iterations faster is the goal, right? Having the right conversation sooner is the goal. So what you just did is you took something that is maybe something that is not the thing you're super pumped about, let's just say, from Figma, brought it into Bolt. Now you get to say, yeah, you could say refactor, make it better. But the point is you could show this in a design review or get together with some important stakeholder around this project. And they could be like, what would be really sick is if like this, right? And then you could just prompt it to be like, what would this look like if this? And then it could just iterate on that and you could experiment super quickly, where that's the kind of stuff that gets unlocked here.
So in this example, I just added, I threw in like refactor, the follow-up questions to include watch session replays, create an experiment, and do a deep dive analysis. So before it was whatever examples I had. And so like now this version has these things. And so then what I could then maybe do is like, okay, when you click one of these, open a modal that does something else. And you can just go from there. It's just more collaboratively accessible. So I could give this to someone else.
Yeah.
They could run
while we're here, just one of the things that kind of blew people's minds when I show them how Bolt works. Can you go back to the interface, the Bolt interface?
Yeah.
So if you hit that deploy button, I think this is a pretty magical part of the whole experience. Have you done this? Have you been deploying?
Oh, all the time. I can't really get into the specifics of the things that I've been doing. This thing that is on screen is already GA, so it's like I can. But what happens when you click this is it sends the code to the Netlify API and just creates a public link of whatever app is inside your little Bolt instance. So now you can like actually click this link and it's like a real website. So you could send this link to a customer, to your stakeholders, to anybody. Like you could send it to usertesting.com and you could get feedback from non-customers on your idea. It blows it wide open. And like theoretically, Figma could do that too. You can make public links in your Figma prototypes or whatever. But yeah, it's getting back to what is being disrupted actually. It's the time to executed idea is like orders of magnitude approaching nothing.
It's wild. The cool thing about this deploying it too, that I know a bunch of people started doing as well, is that you can add analytics, right? Because it's actually like a website. So you can add like something like PostHog or Amplitude probably. I don't know how easy to do that.
Let's add Amplitude.
Yeah, or Amplitude, right? If you're using Amplitude, and you can not only get qual data on the feedback, but you actually see that where people get stuck, what people want to touch, right? And I think that, or click on, I think that's super powerful too. You just get a lot more insights that otherwise it would have been so hard to get. Well, I'm curious to get your take on because as a PM, I look at this as like, instead of writing a spec, I'm just going to go into the Figma, put my thoughts in there, right? Like here are the things that I want to change, and then go to the designer directly. And actually, we were talking to a PM in the podcast, Rodrigo, that he was saying, actually, like, I'm not even sure that PRDs make sense anymore because you're spending so much time thinking about it. Actually, like the artifact that should be the source of truth and the best way to communicate it can just be having a prototype. So I'm curious if you're seeing PMs at Amplitude also move maybe a little bit away from PRD.
So
you just implement Amplitude?
Yeah, I just implemented Amplitude, which is pretty wild. It just
that literally just took like 1 minute.
Oh no, 10 seconds. Yeah, as soon as you started talking, I'm like, implement Amplitude. There's a your API key here thing that needs to be replaced. But so to answer your question, Mark, like I think what I'm hearing is there's a mantra that existed in a lot of design forward companies in the past. So like IDEO, for example, they used to say, never come to a meeting without a prototype. And IDEO was like a company of designers. It was a company of designers and researchers, right? And product, like the product development, but it was very design focused. I think that this is now the minimum bar, in my opinion, is like, if you're talking about proposing something, like there's literally no excuse to not have and this is what it could look like component to that. The risk is you just generate kind of stuff without thinking it through, and then that stuff gets rubber stamped. And then it's the same thing of if someone asks you a question, you ask ChatGPT, and then you paste the response without thinking about it. But that on a macro scale, of product scale, super danger zone. You do not want to be doing that. But if you use the tools intentionally, you have an internalized expectation of quality, deeply understand a problem, use the tools to accelerate, and then validate it with your brain, you can do things good and fast. Product briefs are really important conceptually because they can serve as a source of truth for the idea. Like product briefs get a lot of bad rap because it's like you spend all this time writing this thing, no one reads it, no one cares, it gets out of date, whatever. But we're talking about this a lot internally at Amplitude, is how do we do better briefs? Because we want to, like, how do you make better bets? Like, how do you in what way do you identify problems, figure out what would happen if that problem was solved, validate that before committing to doing it? Can you do more cycles up front to kick the tires on things? That's where I think this stuff shines, because basically the front end is disposable. If you can generate front end, it's not like sacred to hold on to at all. Like it's, what if it was completely different? You can just try things, flip it upside down, and the cost is nothing. Where keep all your infrastructure, keep all your APIs. What if the user experience was completely different? So there's going to be this wave, here prediction, there's going to be this big wave of all these companies that just historically had a hard time doing good front end. Everything's just going to get good because it's easy. It's easy, and you can copy stuff. You can copy good. And so there's going to be this, maybe there's this bad thing. Maybe a lot of things are going to start to look the same. But do you remember Bootstrap? Remember when Bootstrap came out and all websites looked like Bootstrap? Like every startup in San Francisco had the same Helvetica, the same buttons or whatever, right? And it's like, I don't know.
I think you make such an important point here, that the way this goes wrong is that you're able to hype like lazy thinking with beautiful visuals, and then you go
Yeah.
ship it, you end up with a Frankenstein product that then you're
Yep.
like, oh shit, like why did we go that path? And now you're like in that type 2 decision where you cannot reverse, right? Or type 1, I forgot which one it is. And when you were saying that, kind of what reminds me is like what Jeff Bezos always said of the reason why we have reading culture at Amazon is because you can hide your lazy thinking with presentations.
Yeah.
And I actually feel with PRDs now where like they've become the new presentations because you have like tools like Chat PRD, etc., that can write it for you, can format it really nicely, can make it sound smartly, can kind of can copy like previous context almost. I'm almost wondering like, how do you create actually like how do you make it productive and high leverage the process of coming up with that product brief? And just like thinking out loud here, like the way I would think about it, there's probably 2 things that you want to be doing a lot more of, right? It's one is probably spend way more time with customers. I think like you're only going to come up with better thinking and a better path. And then the other one is just actually spending more time thinking, period. Right. And I think some people think by writing, some other people think by drawing and creating diagrams, but I think that's probably where the high leverage is. Yeah. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think we call it a product brief, which always forces it to become about the product. But I think when I think about what it should be and what I think it will be increasingly becoming is like an opportunity brief or something like that, right? It's like you've got a bunch of bets you can make. People want to make cases for funding certain bets or certain investments. I think increasingly the UX risk and the implementation risk and execution risk on the product side will get lower and lower. So it will become a smaller part of the conversation. And the bets will probably, there will be more time spent discussing strategic alignment with the longer term vision, business model, and like revenue implications, go to market implications and messaging, like those kind of things. So basically, like, yeah, I think every discussion about a PRD being about the product itself is going to be, I don't know, it's like people just start assuming the product will be good, is I think my take. And then I think that the rest of the conversation is still, okay, well, we still only have so many finite amount of resources, finite amount of real estate in the product, finite amount of GTM opportunities to tell customers about things, finite amount of sales cycles to go to like hammer. So I think it's going to be more about assuming we can execute really well in any of these product ideas, what are the right product ideas to work on? And that's where it comes back to like opportunity sizing and like strategic alignment and what it unlocks from an optionality and strategy perspective, that kind of thing. That's at least where my head goes.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other risk that I'm predicting too is where a lot of companies are going to go wrong is I actually think that these new technology are actually going to give a lot more capacity and bandwidth to teams. They're actually going to be able to do way more, like from not just design, but engineering, product. And I think the way you go wrong is instead of like just going, I think you have 2 paths of you keep adding more and more features and you do more and more, or you go very deep into a very narrow field. And I think my guess is that the products that do really well are going to go very deep and going to try to get a really like almost like a PhD level understanding of like a very specific problem space and just be very disciplined at staying there, versus other companies are going to be like, here are all these things, like, oh, let's just add this because it's going to be really easy. And then you end up with a super complex, convoluted product. I think that's going to be like the risk that I foresee.
I think to navigate that in the future, I think companies are going to have to get much better at something that I think companies are generally really fucking bad at, which is killing features and killing products. And like there's so much sunk cost that goes into why companies are so reluctant to kill features today. But in a world where the cost of building new features and experimenting with new 0 to 1 bets becomes so low, I'm hoping that yes, we will see more Frankenstein-y moments in a product where this thing that doesn't fit is just thrown into there. But if people want that thing, I think it'll get a lot more love very quickly and it'll become a more permanent part of it and get embedded into the UX. But hopefully we're going to see, I would love to see the velocity of killing features go up as part of all the, like maybe that's a hot take, but yeah, we're going to be building way more features than ever before. But I would also love to be seeing us killing more features than ever before.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's a couple ways I could slice that. It's almost like the hard part is the conceptual part of how everything fits together. The hard part is not making good UI, especially not anymore. Now that has been proven to be exceptionally easy. And I'm not suggesting that anyone do this, but you can go to your favorite app and screenshot the app and copy it. And so front end code is almost like now a disposable layer where it's like the baseline expectation is going to rise incredibly rapidly. Enterprise companies can no longer hide behind the fact that they're an enterprise company and the buyer is not the user to allow a shitty experience to exist. Everyone will expect good experiences everywhere. And so then that's going to get delivered on. And so then what is differentiated is like, what is the conceptual model? How does this map to the real world? Do people understand this? Is it valuable? All the things Ben was saying, like the work then happens at the strategic level and the distribution level and the go-to-market level. The UI quality layer is almost, I don't want to say it's removed from the equation, but it's just like the equation is different now. The equation, it's a different equation. The balance is different. And so as on the UX side, like the product designers need to be thinking about the conceptual model, the nouns and the verbs, like what is happening, like making sure that people can stay in flow, all of these like more fuzzy things, and not spending a ton of time on prototyping, stuff like that. Because
I think what you said last time is like what you said last time around figuring out what the data model is and like what information goes where, right? And how to surface information, how to store information, how to move information around. That I think whoever does that stuff the best will create what's fundamentally the most intuitive and delightful experience, because in a world where like the UI elements and the Lego blocks for building a product are commoditized, if I play with your product and it looks delightful, but the content is garbage and it's not useful for me, then I will stop using it, even if it's beautiful. But a product that has the right kind of data moving in the right kind of ways, and it's extremely strategic in how it serves me from an architecture perspective, then I think those products are going to do really well.
Yeah. My pushback would be like, why wouldn't that get also commoditized? And why wouldn't there be like tools that just allow you to, based on a simple explanation of what you're trying to build, would take previous data and also build that data model for you, right? Like
I think it's because people's mental models for the way that they want to leverage data in their workflows is evolving faster than we've been able to establish best practices for the way to surface that data through user experience. So, in other words, this is not yet a solved problem.
Yeah.
And I think
once it is, then it would be able to do that, right?
But at the pace of change that's happening right now, you got to build for where the puck is heading, not where the puck was and is. And I think we don't know yet how people are going to expect the data models to work in product 6 months from now. It's probably going to be as different as where we are today versus 5 years ago at this pace. It's possible.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's really clear to me is that the key skill here that I think that's going to make products unique and special is like being able to remix all these right pieces in the right way, right? Like aligning the data model with the UI, with the go-to-market, while also having a very clear vision of where the system is going, and also maintaining that system clean, organized, and being disciplined about, hey, here's what we should kill, here's what we shouldn't. Like I think that to me, and it's making me think maybe we'll back to the question that I think that we started to touch at the end of the last podcast, be like, hey, if you were going to teach a course for product designers today, like what would that course, how has your thinking changed of what that course should include?
Yeah, it goes back to like, what are the things that are timeless versus what are the things that are changing? And so the fundamental thing that I think is changing is the premise that the most expensive part of this process is that the human being handcrafting lines of code to make it real, right? That is no longer true. And so with that not being true, then what is different? What is the same? And the things that are more important than ever are deeply understanding humans, right? As we talked about. I don't want to reiterate my answer, but it's like psychology, user needs, like the fundamental stuff, and then mapping that into something that's easily understood. It's almost like the UX part. The problem is the rest of it is all just assumed, right? So it's like good user experience is assumed to be needed. It's expected. A good interface is it's expected. So as a craftsperson, it is no longer enough to just have your wireframes and be like, let me give this to the other person. You're expected to do it all yourself. And so it's basically, from a UX standpoint, what I'd say is it's basically like you can use the AI thought partner to close your skill gaps, and you are expected to do the whole loop yourself. You're expected to understand like what matters, what is the problem that exists, how do we go about solving that problem, what does that problem look like when it's solved, what is like the smallest most coherent version of that, what is like the next version, what is the long-term vision, why does this matter, and then like how do we learn that it's actually working and prove that it's actually working. Some of that can be data pumping my Amplitude bags, use Amplitude, figure out if your product works, but then also talking to people, right? And then there's also outcomes, so like revenue, like you can tell if your product is working if it makes money. But yeah, it's basically just the expectation of being able to do multiple skill trees grows. It's the future belongs to generalists, I think, and then we're going to re-specialize later. Like the pendulum between generalist and specialist has swung back to generalists. And then as the world evolves, maybe in the future it swings back to specialists before the next generation of innovation unlocks something new.
I've got a follow up here, Mark. You mind? In a world where the future belongs to generalists and these prototyping tools across the stack produce consistently high quality components.
Can I pause you on high quality components? Yeah. So what does quality mean? So quality.
This is where I'm going.
Yes. Okay, good. Because so, I'll just say, by the way,
it's a slippery slope to go down this line of questioning. If any of you have ever read the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, have you read it?
I love it. It changed my worldview. So continue.
Yeah, it's like a massive book all about an inquiry into value and quality and stuff, right? Yeah. So it's a loaded subject. But what I was going to ask about is a flavor maybe of quality as it pertains to craft, which is taste. And I wanted to get a sense from you as someone who I generally consider someone with very good taste, at least when it comes to the craft of product design, at least, and I'm sure in other areas too, but definitely in that area. Where are we in the journey? Like, where are we on the taste scale today with some of the tools that you've been playing with? And would you say that they have neutral taste, bad taste, good taste? I know it's also probably a loaded
term. Do you mean the AI tools?
Yeah.
You want me to evaluate how good they are with my taste barometer? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and then also, do you think that's going to be one of those things that if you're teaching a course to like people starting off their design career today, is it like double down, triple down on your taste because that's going to be increasingly unique relative to something that AI won't be good at?
I see. So I'm channeling Kari, CEO of Linear right now, but so taste is critically important because it's like when you think of quality, what does quality mean? Holistic quality is like a impression that you feel when everything like works together nicely. And historically, part of the reason there's lots of things that can make something not quality, especially with regard to software. So like performance, for example, is a huge quality thing. But then there's perceived performance and load time. So that's where you have skeleton states and partial loading states and progressive, making it feel like it's smoother, right? Which has nothing to do with how long it actually takes to load. And those are two, like one of them is like a design thing and one of them is a technical engineering thing. But like when it works together, like it can feel like it's quality, but then what actually loads when it's finished loading. Like that's also part of what makes something quality. Quality is fuzzy because it means what it's talking about is how good is everything when you consider it all together. And breaking it down, which you can do, but breaking it down depends on what the thing is. And so there's not really a good global, like generalized way to define quality because the quality of a piece of leather is different than the quality of a car is different than the quality of a friendship. It's all just different, right? And it's hard.
So what's the relationship between quality and taste? In your head, what's the relationship between quality and taste?
So taste is how you discern quality. So taste is a barometer that you have. And that's when people say quality is like, you know it when you see it. That's like an oversimplified way of saying, I can tell if something is quality or not because of my taste. That's what that means. Some people don't know it when they see it or don't. They don't know because they don't have good taste. So that's what that means. I think that saying you know it when you see it feels lazy to me. I prefer to like okay, well, in this context, what does it mean? And how do you break it down? And so I got to give a hat tip to Tyler Wanlass, as the director of design at Amplitude, who recently joined from the Command AI acquisition. He's a great design leader, and he helped lead a conversation around this topic at a recent offsite. And the example he gave, he put up this big slide. There's a Toyota Camry from 98 and then a brand new Lexus. Which one's higher quality? And like, why? Like what? And it's like, yeah, I would prefer the Lexus, but like in my family, we had a Corolla for many years and it never broke down. And what is quality? Is it ROI? Is it perceived value? It's not certain things. It's not luxury. It's not aesthetic. Aesthetic can signal quality, but it's not the same thing. What is quality? Is quality like it meets the spec? Is quality like it has a good outcome, business outcome? Is quality like meets expectations? What are expectations? Right? And it's like, so it depends.
Is it about ROI? Right? Like,
it's hard. But when you really break it down and think about it, taste is one of those things where it's like the people who created the thing had a bar for what this thing fulfilling its purpose is, and they meet and or exceed that bar. And it's fuzzy to explain in the abstract, but we could dig into like a concrete specific example, maybe as like, that little loading animation thing I was showing you earlier. Like the reason that's just one simple example of like, I cared enough to make the details of that feel right in the context of like when someone was experiencing this thing, they would have this feedback loop that made them feel more confident. And that's just one tiny example of something that makes the experience feel more high quality. And when you have all these things fitting together, it feels high quality. And when you have one weird, broken, janky thing, the whole thing, it's like, oh man. But it's, do you forgive that moment or not? And like, that's why it's fuzzy.
What I was thinking when you were talking, Will, was that like the key thing here is context almost, right? Like the context is super, super important, right? And almost like taste and quality is all about like, hey, based on what you know about the people that you're solving for and the problem you're solving for, are you building the best solution possible with that in mind? And do all the pieces fit together and fit within the system that you're designing on top of? I think that's like the key part. And I think going back to what we're talking in the beginning, I think with these tools like V0 or Bolt, like the aesthetics are almost getting commoditized. Like I think there's some like very clear, like, okay, here, this looks good or it doesn't. But I think the important thing here of taste and quality is like how like just everything fits together and fits within the context, and just like how something is solved for a specific user or ICP. That's how I think about it.
And how do you know? Like, how do you know what the bar should be for the people you're building for? How do you know what their expectations are? And this is where it's like, you have to go talk to them. You have to spend time with them. You have to have empathy. You have to understand them. You have to talk to them and translate your conversation into like, these are their needs. This is what it would mean for them if these needs were met. This is how they're doing it today. So this creates a bar that we need to meet or pass, right? And like, it all kind of fits together. That's the stuff that's the most important stuff. And I don't want to say don't worry about the fundamentals of hierarchy and type and graphic design and stuff. I think that stuff is important because it's like, it helps if something is good. But that part of, I don't know. It's really hard to say because I have an art history background. Why do I have that? Right? I know all sorts of stuff about things that happened in the past. Why is that useful? Maybe it comes up in context today. Maybe it doesn't. But it's like, what should people learn if they want to be effective in the future? Like today, that's a really good question. And use the tools, but then also know the fundamentals, because knowing the fundamentals is part of what helps establish your taste barometer. That's what
empathy.
Yeah.
Empathy is a big one.
Yes. Big plus. Yes. And I would say what came to mind when you say like, it's like experience design, right? It's like holistic experience design. How do you make something that is delightful for people? I think about like omakase sushi dinners that are expensive and amazing. It's not because they just give you a tremendous amount of food. There's just, it tastes really good, but the presentation's really good. And you watch them make it with care and they give it to you like that you see the
It's
love
presented to you.
The attention that is being put into it makes it value. They're like imbuing it with value, right? They're imbuing it with love. And then when you receive it and you take a bite of it, it tastes better. Like you appreciate it more. It feels like you're participating in an experience, which goes to ties back to software. Like I look at a tool like Linear, which is obviously Kari's company as a designer. I'm using Linear for a project right now. And like, I'm using maybe 5% of what Linear can do because it's like me and one other person. But I can see and I know people at Linear, like we've had Nan on the podcast, a bunch of people on the team there. They put a tremendous amount of care. Like Linear is almost like an omakase sushi of software, right? It's like they put love and they put attention and detail into every part of that product. And so when you use it, it feels high quality. Could I have come up with it with my own taste? I don't think I have the taste to come up with what they came up with, but they have the taste to come up with what they came up with. And they've refined a sense of taste that now tells them whether something is not up to the standards of that it needs to be at in order to belong inside of that product and not feel like it's like a malignant tumor inside of the product. Like it has to feel like it's part of it. So
for sure.
It all seems kind of connected back to experience, something around experience design.
It is. So in case we forgot, the X in UX stands for experience. So like this is, the whole thing is full circle, right? We're not talking about anything that's truly new or different. It's just, UX is so much more important now that the UI is getting into the commodified zone where it's like, yes, there's exceptions where like truly great design engineers and front end people can do magical stuff. And there's going to be innovation around that and new patterns are getting invented. But the baseline expectation of what good is, the floor has been raised a little bit. But that is also incredibly easy to copy and everyone's going to copy each other really fast. And so everything is going to just get good, I think, which is a good thing for users. But the trap, going back to the bullshit territory trap, if people are just copying stuff without thinking it through and thinking about how it fits together, like that's really bad. And there's going to be
you'll have good UI with bad UX, right? Like we could end up with a bunch of good
Apple
UI
photos.
Yeah, it's terrible. I don't know what those guys are thinking over there right now. If I'm honest,
sorry, Apple photos, if you're listening, I love you, but
yeah. So maybe there's
can't win all the time.
There's a judgment perspective of it, right? Of like, hey, like, is this a recommendation? But is this like the right thing to do? And it's maybe going back to like we were saying before of like, someone might ask ChatGPT to summarize something and the people have the good judgment and be like, hey, this sounds like ChatGPT. Let me edit it. Let me modify it because that's not the bar that I have for myself. And
so, but then at what altitude do you edit it? So this is a really great example. I love this. Are you saying, let me read it and tweak some words? Or are you saying the narrative arc of this does not represent the way that I want to come off to this person? This needs to be completely rewritten. I can maybe use a few sentences, but it's like, I actually first want to disagree with the core premise of what they're saying and then provide some alternatives and like why, rather than, yeah, that's a great idea. And here's like that type of slop, right?
Yeah, I think that's like the money question. And from my experience, I think that's where experience and expertise is really important, because I think you need, like, if you're not very experienced at doing something, you actually don't really know what are the small steps you need to take to break it down to actually come up with a great output. Like going back to the example of like writing, right? Like you first probably want to get like all your ideas right in place, right? So if I'm using ChatGPT for writing, like the first thing I'll do is instead of having them write right away, I'm going to have them like brainstorm with me, like the different angles and the different outlines of how we could present this idea. Then I think once we're done at that level, then we kind of can get maybe a little bit like deeper, be like, hey, like actually let's start putting the pieces together. Let's start the writing. And I think then I think that when I've done that, when I've broken it down into those pieces, like I feel like I've gotten the best output. But I think a lot of people, like if they haven't done that thing before, right? If you haven't spent a lot of time like writing blog articles, you don't really know that's probably the best way to get there. And I don't know. So that's been my experience.
You're exactly right, Mark. That's an example of when you have the reps and the internalized expectation of what quality is. You know what the bar is. So when you use these tools, then you can evaluate yourself in a loop with them And then you can do good and fast. You can like, here are my raw notes, which are like the conceptually correct raw notes, like format it and elaborate or whatever, add this, that, and the other. And then you get the dish at the end that you want. But if you don't know what that is, it produces this thing that looks good, and you're like,
and
that's
because
good.
you lack
Right.
the taste to know whether it's good, you're like, yeah, this is good enough to ship. And then all of us who have good taste, I'd like to think I have good taste, at least when it comes to writing. Like I'll read it and I'll be like, this is garbage, and they might not even know that I can tell that I'm not offending them because I know they didn't write it. I'm attacking their taste, and that they thought it was good enough. Almost like you asked, will people forgive an experience that introduces slop? I will do it if I'm not offended by it. Okay. And what I mean by that is sometimes you watch a movie or you watch a show and you're like, man, I'm kind of like, this is so bad. I'm almost offended that they think that this would be like believable. Right. Like, or like bad
It's 5 minutes
acting
of my time I'm never going to get back. I can't. I want my minutes back, please. That was a huge waste of my time.
It's exactly, because if I'm watching a show and there's like a scene that's happened and it's supposed to be believable, and I can tell like it's not believable at all, and it's like offensive to my intelligence that they thought it would pass, that's not acceptable. And so that's how I think about these things, is like, if it passes my credibility test and it feels authentic and it feels real, I will forgive it, even if the quality of the content is not great. But if it feels authentic and real, then it carries more weight than something that looks polished but feels fake. And I think that's, for me, I'm curious what you guys think about that.
What I'm hearing from what you're saying, Ben, is that like authenticity is an important component of your taste barometer.
Yes. And I'll give you an example of how I put this into practice. So we had the Lenny post go live this week. I know Lenny has a very high quality bar. It's one of the reasons we like Lenny, and the reason we follow his newsletter and his podcast is because he, I think, holds the highest consistent quality bar of anyone in the content space in the product world. So having worked with Lenny, I knew he would have a very high quality bar. I also knew I wanted to undertake a very ambitious post and write a bunch of stuff that would be extremely long for me to do on my own. So I needed to use some boosters from AI, right? I think it would be crazy if I didn't.
Performance enhancing
AI
writing components. Yeah.
We could probably do a whole episode on just like my writing process for that post, but basically learning to maintain my voice and making sure that as I read the final result of that post, it sounded like me, even though it was generated largely and drafted largely, very meticulously, one piece at a time with AI with very prescriptive guidance for me. The final result feels holistic. It feels like I wrote it. I'm proud of it. So even though I used AI to make it, I wouldn't say I compromised the quality of the post by doing so, if that makes
Totally.
sense.
Yeah. But I think the key thing is like, there's a winning recipe that Ben has, right? And I think the problem is that a lot of people don't know that there's a recipe, right? And they're just cutting corners. And then that's where they're really stuck, right? Because they end up with a shitty piece, but they don't really know like what parts of the recipe they didn't follow properly. And then they're just stuck, which is the same thing with Bolt, right? Or like Cursor. Like that's why people really struggle debugging these tools, because then they're like, oh shit, I'm in a bug. I don't know what file it is. I don't know what function. I don't know what component. I don't even know what a component is. So I think that's like the danger of the current state of AI, right? It's like
100%. Yeah. It's like you should use AI to accelerate routine tasks, help with research, help sharpen your ideas, use it as a thought partner. AI can help automate repetitive stuff. It can generate content variations. It can help brainstorm. It can process massive data sets instantly. It can recognize patterns it can read 1,000 things at the same time. It can execute things for you. It can come up with things you might have not expected, but you can't outsource your human judgment. You can't outsource your taste. You can't outsource your critical thinking necessarily. You can use it as a critical thinking partner, which is great to do, but AI doesn't automatically understand your context or the nuance. It can't make ethical judgments necessarily. It has to be programmed to do that, right? It can't always explain itself or why it does a certain thing or whatever if you take it at face value. There's novel situations that don't show up in the training data that it might just completely do the wrong thing. And there's no empathy. AI doesn't have empathy. Like human empathy is critically important to figuring this stuff out, right? How do you know if what you're doing is the right thing? How does it meet the bar that you've set in your mind based on your own understanding of the bar, right? And so that has to come from you. That's the human thing. We're making stuff for humans, right? And the AI is this great alien thing which is broken onto the scene that lets us go 1,000 miles an hour. It's, oh man, before I was only limited to 150 miles an hour. Now I can go 1,000 miles an hour, which is just crazy, but also dangerous. You don't want to hit a wall going 1,000 miles an hour. It'll be completely evaporated. There's zero chance of survival. Luckily, we're not actually running into walls, but the metaphor hopefully lands.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why like one of the most helpful and exciting UI patterns that I've seen in the AI space has been like this push for transparency, like especially like after these like reasoning models launched, where you actually like get to see how the model works and thinks. And then you can actually interfere and be like, actually, I don't know if I agree with this step, or actually like it almost helps you understand how it works. And then, you know, kind of gives you the information to intercept either when something's not going right, or just build a better intuition for when to use something versus not to use something. And I think that's actually like going back to the loading states that you were showing us, right? Like, I think that's, again, same concept. You're bringing transparency and trust, and now you're a little bit more informed about what's happening.
But that's also just the baby V1, right? There's the thing in my head, which is like 4 iterations from that. But it's just, what I'm talking about is, instead of 0, we now have this pretty good thing as the first version. And so AI is changing the way that we work all the way up and down the stack, from thinking and writing and strategy and why should anything exist, to like planning and prototyping and whatever, all the way down to actual execution of the real thing that actually goes and gets delivered. And it's happening at all of these things in different ways at the same time. And I just go back to like, if you're not already using these things, do yourself a favor and start now, because the best time to have started is yesterday.
And the second best time is today.
Yes.
Okay. This is a lot of fun. And I know we have a hard stop in 3 minutes. So I think this is a great place to wrap up. Will,
so much fun talking to you guys. Yes.
I feel very satisfied. So last time we talked about how people should go check out amplitude.com if they need more analytical ways of tracking what's going on in their product and getting insights. So big fan of Amplitude. I don't know if I told you, but Marc and I regularly see people recommend Amplitude in Supra when it comes to best kind of like, is that your kiddo?
Yeah. We got a baby saying hi.
You can bring, we have a tradition of bringing babies on camera if you want to.
I think I missed the window.
Sorry about that. Anything else that the audience can do to be helpful? Anything comes to mind?
Main thing is, if you're building a digital product, you gotta understand how people are using your digital product. So Amplitude can help you do that. And on the, we're hiring at Amplitude. So, you know, if you care about this type of stuff, feel free to reach out. Do we have crying in the background? Do we need to try that again?
I think it's the perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
You're good.
Awesome.
Will, you're the man.
We'll let you go.
This is awesome.
Thank you so much.
Super fun. I'm excited for part 3. I'm sure it'll happen.
Yes, soon. As soon as the next thing comes out. Thanks so much, you guys, for having me.
Yeah.
Sounds good. That's a wrap.
Right, see ya.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone who you think would benefit from it as well. We really appreciate it. We'd also love a follow or a rating on Substack, Spotify, or YouTube. That's going to let other people find us. And if you have any topic recommendations for a future episode, please send myself or Marc a DM on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks.